Yo! Today I want to talk about my family. See, we just got back from a week-long trip in Mexico City. When I say Mexico City, people are like, huh? What? Danger? Cancun? No, we didn't go to Cancun. We went to Mexico City. And when I tell you what we learned during the week there and the food we ate and the culture that we immersed ourselves in was incredible. It was incredible. We had such a good time. Today's topic is about another family that I want to discuss with you. And this family is called the Margin siblings. See, we all can agree that wholesale today is a tough slug. It's a really tough slug. So, the way we combat that tough slug is to understand our margins on a new level like we've never understood them before. See, way back in the day, Mama Margin and Daddy Margin had 3 margin children. The oldest, Gross Margin, well, he's the oldest. Talks a lot, annoying. You know the kid I'm talking about. The second child, she is just lovely to be around, and she's Contribution Margin. She's actually quite useful. She doesn't talk back. She gives you a lot of useful information and helpful information, and just really cool to be around. Last is Net Margin. Net Margin is the baby, mama's boy, spoiled brat, and probably will rule the world one day. See, these 3 margin siblings grew up to be super important business topics if you happen to be selling a product like you are. So today I'm going to walk you through a bit of a deep dive on what each of these margins mean, how to calculate them, and what our acceptable benchmark is for these. Okay? Sit back and relax. Don't take many notes. I'll tell you why at the end. Just hang out. So first up is gross margin, right? As I said before, oldest child, semi-useful, talks a lot. We're not going to solve the world's problems with gross margin. What is gross margin? Okay, it's revenue minus cost of goods sold divided by revenue. It's pretty surface level stuff. It tells us a few things, but it's pretty surface level. Okay, what gross margin tells us is how much do we have left over to pay our general and administrative expenses, right? How much do we have left over for payroll, utilities, rent, keg leasing, advertising? How much do we have left over? Some general gross margin benchmarks are for packaged beer, it's going to be between 60 and 70%. For keg beer, it's going to be between 40 and 50%. Okay? So that's gross margin in a nutshell. It's, like I said, mediocrely useful, but we need to calculate it. It's got to be there, right? Next up is contribution margin. Okay, this is going to be a new concept for some of you, but hang with me and don't get too caught up in it because I'm going to help you out at the end. But what contribution margin said is once the product is sold, how much is left over to contribute to your fixed expenses? See, when we sell beer or spirits, all of our variable costs, our raw materials, our packaging, our labor, our supplies are all built into that pricing. And what contribution says is, okay, once we figure out all those expenses, like, can we actually contribute more to our fixed expenses? I sure hope we can. It'd be a weird thing if we can't. So contribution margin, it's not a cut and dry calculation. So I don't have a calculation for you, but what I can tell you is the benchmark for a contribution margin is it needs to be positive. Once that product is sold, we need to have some left over to contribute to our overall fixed costs. Okay, we never want to have a negative contribution margin. Got it? Last is net margin. This is the spoiled one. This is the one that's going to rule the world. All right. What net margin says is After everything is considered, all your expenses are calculated, every line item on the P&L is taken into consideration. How much is left? What is left of that SKU? Is there anything? Is there anything for you to take home? And the way we calculate this, it's not a one size fits all. It's not. We go line by line, right? So taproom labor, right? Taproom labor, we're not going to consider taproom labor in our net margin for wholesale, right? Production labor, we're going to do it based on barrels. We're going to do it based on revenue. We don't know, right? We've got to look at the face of the P&L. We've got to figure out what allocation are we going to do. Taproom supplies, we're not going to use much of that because that's for the taproom. Brewery expense. Now, brewery expense is your all-encompassing account, and a lot of that's going to be for wholesale. So we're probably going to use that based on a barrel or a revenue amount to allocate those expenses, okay? And what all this does is it brings us to a net margin per SKU. Now, the benchmark for net margin. Please be seated for this. The benchmark for net margin, folks, is between 1% and 5%. 1% and 5%. Your taproom net margin is 12 to 18. The net margin for wholesale is 1 to 5. Okay. Not only is this a abysmal and a critically small net margin, it doesn't leave a lot of room for error. One delayed shipment, one botched tank, one delayed knockout, and that margin starts to slip to zero in the negatives, right? So our wholesale game needs to be on and our margin calculations need to be on. If you happen to be distributing just an ounce of beer, you need to incorporate the margin siblings in your daily life. Okay, this is something that needs to be calculated and maintained on a regular basis. Someone in your organization needs to do that. Okay, because these are going to tell you which beers to distribute, which beers not to distribute. It's really a simple concept. Now, I just threw a ton of information at you. And the name of the wholesale game is try to get to profit, right? So I have an offer for you to run through the calculations that I just described. We want to calculate your margins for you in wholesale. So you've heard me say this before. Head down to the bottom, click the link, fill out the 4 fields, and someone from the consulting team will be in touch. If you distribute, this is an absolute no-brainer. I hope to talk to you soon.